A German shepherd guided a U.S. Marine across a flooded field, to what needed warmth most. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. He wasn't supposed to be out there. Not with the river swollen past its banks, not with the wind carrying the sharp scent of mud and cold, not with the land itself groaning under the weight of a storm that had already taken too much. Staff Sergeant Daniel Harlow stands at the edge of the flooded field, boots sinking into the soaked earth, breath visible in the chilly Montana night. The world around him is a blur of rain and distant thunder, muted like a memory too heavy to hold. But River, the German shepherd with the storm-colored coat, won't stop staring into the darkness. His body is tense. His ears flick once. Then he pulls. Not wildly, not panicked. Intentional. Certain. Daniel tightens his grip on the leash, feeling the dog's urgency pulse through the nylon. Easy, boy, he murmurs, though his voice isn't steady. Not tonight. Not with the storm reminding him of nights overseas when the sky carried the same color of worry. River steps forward into the shallow water, the ripples spreading like shivers across a sleeping pond. Daniel follows because something in the dog's stance, in the low, steady sound rumbling from his chest, says this isn't random. River pauses again, glancing back at Daniel with those amber eyes that seem older than his years, as if he's seen things no creature should have to see. Then he moves deeper into the field, water now brushing past his legs. Daniel's breath catches as the cold bites through his jeans. The scent of wet hay drifts across the wind, mixed with the faint metallic tang of lightning. A single beam from Daniel's flashlight cuts through the haze, landing on nothing but the trembling reflection of rain. "What are you trying to show me?" he whispers. River doesn't answer, but his tail stiffens, his nose lifts, and he presses on. The ground softens beneath Daniel's step, the kind of softness that feels alive, shifting, unpredictable. He steadies himself, inhaling deeply, the air tasting of stormwater and distant pine. And then, another sound. So faint he almost misses it. A tremor in the air more than a note. A small, fractured whimper. River hears it too. His ears snap forward. His body lowers. He stares into the dark as if the night itself is holding its breath. Daniel freezes, pulse quickening, the world narrowing to that tiny broken sound carried on the wind. River takes one last step, looks back, and Daniel understands, something out there is waiting for warmth, waiting for them. And they are already too far in to turn back. The sound comes again, faint but certain, carried on the wind like a breath too tired to rise. Daniel steadies his footing as the mud shifts beneath him, the cold soaking through his boots until it feels like the earth is gripping his ankles, asking him to turn back. But River will not turn back. The German shepherd steps forward with a soft determination, his tail low, his ears angled toward that fragile whimper hidden somewhere in the dark. Daniel lifts the flashlight higher, the beam trembling across the flooded field. Rain taps against the metal casing like impatient fingers. The light lands on drifting grass, on broken fence posts, on ripples that move against the wind. Something living disturbs the water ahead. River senses it before Daniel does. The dog's paws slow, then stop, his body leaning slightly to the right, nose pointed toward a cluster of reeds half submerged. Daniel whispers, "There." River answers with a quiet rumble, not warning, not fear. It is something else. Recognition, maybe. Instinct older than training, older than words. Daniel steps closer, each movement careful, controlled. The water rises past his shins, icy enough to numb. The air carries the smell of wet soil and cedar from a distant grove. A small shape shifts inside the reeds, barely visible. Daniel lowers himself, ignoring the cold that tightens across his chest. He angles the flashlight downward, and the beam flickers over a patch of pale fabric trapped between reeds, swaying gently with the current. River inches closer, nose brushing the edge of the reeds, breath steady. The whimper returns, thin but fighting. Daniel feels something inside him tighten. The familiar pull he once felt on long deployments when a single sound meant a life still holding on. Easy, he murmurs to River, though the words are as much for himself. He reaches forward, fingers skimming the surface of the water. The reeds part with a soft sigh, revealing a small bundled shape tucked against the natural shelter the grass has formed. It is a blanket, soaked and heavy, edges tangled with roots and silt. Daniel touches it gently. The fabric twitches. River leans in, offering his warmth, his breath steady and low like a promise. Daniel draws the bundle closer, careful not to break whatever fragile hope lies inside. The weight shifts in his hands, lighter than he expects, trembling against his palms. A soft sound escapes from within, a sound that does not belong to fear but to someone trying to stay awake in a world gone cold. Daniel lifts his eyes to River. "You found it," he whispers, voice thick with something unspoken. River stands tall beside him, water swirling calmly around his legs, as if the storm itself pauses to witness the moment. Daniel cradles the bundle to his chest, shielding it from the rain. The warmth from his body begins to seep into it, slow but sure. The trembling eases. Just a little. The storm growls above them, but the field feels quieter now, as though the darkest part of the night has finally loosened its hold. Daniel closes his eyes for a brief moment, breathing in the scent of wet fur and faint hope. Something out here needed warmth. And now, in his arms, it begins to find it. The bundle in Daniel's arms trembles again, a small flutter like a fading heartbeat trying to return. He holds it closer to his chest, letting his warmth seep through the soaked fabric. The cold bites at his fingers, but he does not pull away. River stays pressed against his leg, lending his own heat, his breath steady in the icy Montana air. The rain softens for a moment, as if the sky itself is taking a slow breath. Daniel turns toward the higher ground, the flashlight beam wobbling over ripples and wet grass. Each step is heavier than the last, the mud tugging at his boots, the flooded field trying to claim every inch of strength he has left. "Stay with me," he whispers. To the tiny shape in his arms, though he is not entirely sure who the whisper is for. River moves ahead, checking the path, glancing back every few seconds. His fur glistens with rain, each droplet catching what little light remains, giving him the look of a creature carved from storm and grace. The wind shifts, carrying a faint scent of cedar and wet earth, and for a moment Daniel is transported back to a desert night overseas, when he carried a wounded friend across terrain just as unforgiving. But this time there is no battlefield, no roar of distant engines, no chaos clawing at the edges of the night. Just the sound of water and a life struggling to stay warm. Daniel tightens his grip on the bundle as the ground finally begins to rise. The water recedes from his knees to his shins, then to his ankles, though the mud still clings stubbornly. River pauses near a fallen fence post, looks up at Daniel, and gives a soft whine as if urging him to move faster. Daniel kneels briefly on a patch of higher soil, checking the small shape he carries. The blanket is colder than before, but inside it, something shifts, pressing weakly toward the heat of his chest. "You are fighting," he murmurs, voice thick with quiet relief. "That is all I need from you." River nudges Daniel's shoulder, then places himself close, sharing warmth without being told. The dog's presence feels like a promise, steady and grounding. Lightning flickers again, not sharp but distant, illuminating the field in a pale glow. Daniel studies the shape beneath the blanket. He cannot see the little face yet, but he can feel its fragile determination, the way its trembling steadies each time he breathes. Another soft sound escapes from within, barely louder than a sigh. Daniel presses a gentle hand over the fabric, careful, reverent. The storm has taken much tonight, but not this. Not if he can help it. Almost there, he whispers, rising to his feet. The wind curls around him, cooler now but no longer biting. River leads the way toward the distant outline of Daniel's truck parked near the ridge, its headlights dimmed by the rain. The flooded field behind them ripples with the memory of what nearly slipped away. Daniel walks forward, careful not to jostle the small life clinging to the warmth of his arms. River stays close, vigilant, guiding him step by step through the dark. Together, they carry what the storm could not keep. Daniel reaches the truck just as the rain thins to a mist, the storm's anger fading into a tired drizzle that taps softly against the metal roof. He opens the passenger door with his elbow, careful not to disturb the fragile bundle pressed against his chest. River jumps in first, shaking off droplets that glimmer under the dim dome light, then settles close, watching every movement with quiet urgency. Daniel slides into the seat and pulls the door shut, sealing them away from the cold. The truck becomes a small cocoon of breath and warmth, fog gathering on the windows as the heater begins its slow climb from freezing to bearable. Daniel unwraps the blanket just enough to see what has been fighting so hard in his arms. A tiny puppy, no bigger than his two hands together, lies curled in the damp fabric. Its fur is a soft mixture of tan and sable, flattened by the rain, and its eyes remain closed, lashes trembling with shallow breaths. Daniel places two fingers gently against its side. The heartbeat is faint, fluttering, but steadying as the warmth reaches deeper. River rests his nose beside the pup, exhaling a slow breath like a vow. Daniel whispers, "You did good, boy." The pup responds with the smallest sound, a tiny wobbling whine that melts straight through Daniel's chest. He reaches across the console for an old flannel shirt he keeps in the truck for cold mornings. He wraps it around the puppy, layering it beneath the blanket to trap every bit of warmth. The heater hums louder, pushing warm air through the vents that washes over Daniel's hands and the fragile life he holds. For a moment, everything falls still. No wind. No storm. Just the soft rise and fall of 3 breaths inside a quiet truck parked on the ridge. Daniel closes his eyes briefly, letting relief loosen the tightness in his shoulders. He remembers nights overseas when he held on to hope the same way this pup is holding on to warmth, with a quiet determination that defies the darkness around it. River shifts, placing a paw on Daniel's knee, grounding him. The dog's amber eyes reflect the soft glow of the dashboard, steady and calm. Daniel opens the glove box and pulls out a small towel, still dry. He pats the puppy gently, careful not to disturb its fragile rhythm. Slowly, the trembling eases. A tiny sigh escapes the pup, almost content. Outside, the storm clouds drift apart, revealing a faint silver line of moonlight that slips across the flooded field. Daniel watches it for a moment, the quiet beauty of it catching him off guard. He looks down again at the pup, now nestled warmly between his hands. "You were not supposed to make it out there," he murmurs. "But you did." River rests his head on Daniel's shoulder, a silent agreement. Daniel takes a slow breath, feeling the weight of the night settle into something gentler. He adjusts the flannel around the puppy, making a small cradle of warmth. The tiny body leans into it, trusting without question. And in that simple trust, Daniel feels something inside him thaw, something that had been cold for far too long. Daniel turns the heater a little higher as the truck rumbles slowly onto the gravel road that leads toward his cabin. The storm has dwindled into a quiet drizzle, each raindrop sliding down the windshield like a tired tear. River sits upright in the passenger seat beside him, eyes fixed on the tiny bundle resting securely in Daniel's lap. The puppy's breaths grow steadier with every minute, each one a fragile victory against the cold that tried to claim it. Daniel keeps one hand over the flannel cradle, feeling the warmth returning bit by bit. He speaks softly, almost afraid his voice might disturb the fragile calm. "You are tougher than you look," he murmurs. The pup shifts gently in response, pressing its nose into the fabric as though searching for more warmth. River leans closer, his head nudging Daniel's elbow with a quiet insistence, as if reminding him not to let his guard down. The dog's protective instinct hangs in the air like a second heartbeat. The wipers slide across the windshield, revealing the silhouette of pine trees lining the hillside, their branches heavy with moisture. The night smells of wet bark and distant smoke from someone's wood stove, a scent that always makes Daniel feel both grounded and hollow. He has lived alone since returning from service, the cabin a quiet retreat where he keeps memories boxed away like old photographs he cannot look at yet. But tonight, with the little life breathing weakly in his arms and River keeping watch, the cabin feels less like a refuge and more like a destination with purpose. When he reaches the driveway, he parks the truck carefully beneath the covered awning. The rain taps rhythmically overhead, a soft percussion that blends with the hum of the engine as it dies down. Daniel slides out, cradling the bundle close to his chest. The rush of cold air hits him immediately, but he shields the puppy with his body, keeping it tucked against his warmth. River jumps down and stays at his side, his steps careful, almost reverent. The porch light flickers on when Daniel approaches, casting a gentle amber glow across the wood planks. Inside, the cabin holds a quiet warmth of its own, smelling faintly of pine and old books. Daniel moves straight to the small fireplace, kneeling as he sets the puppy on a folded towel near the hearth. The fire is low, but still warm. He adds a piece of dry oak and watches as the flame catches, growing brighter, fuller, sending waves of heat into the room. The puppy stirs, a tiny sigh escaping its muzzle as the warmth reaches deeper. River settles beside it, lying down with his body curved protectively around the towel. Daniel kneels there for a long moment, one hand resting on River's back, the other hovering above the tiny pup. The firelight dances across their shapes, painting the moment in gold. Daniel's voice drops to a whisper. "You were waiting for us, were you not?" The pup shifts again, leaning toward the warmth of River's fur. The trembling has eased, the breath steadier now. Daniel watches with a quiet awe, the kind that settles over a person when they witness something impossibly fragile choosing to fight. Outside, the last remnants of the storm drift away, leaving the night soft and still. Inside the cabin, warmth gathers around three souls who needed it more than they knew. Morning light creeps slowly into the cabin, soft and pale, settling over the wooden floor like a gentle promise. Daniel has not slept. He sits beside the hearth with his back against the couch, legs stretched out, watching the tiny puppy curled between River's paws. The fire has burned low, but the warmth lingering in the stones keeps the room comfortable. River has stayed awake most of the night, shifting only to adjust his body around the pup, guarding it with a kind of quiet devotion that makes Daniel's chest tighten. The puppy's breaths are steadier now, no longer the fragile flickers that worried him through the storm. Every few minutes, it lets out a soft hum, something between a sigh and a tiny question, as though checking if the world is still here. Daniel leans in closer and touches the back of his hand gently to the pup's side. Warm. Not hot, not cold. Just warm. Relief washes through him so suddenly he has to exhale slowly to steady himself. He murmurs, "You are holding on. Good." The room smells faintly of smoke, wet pine, and something softer that Daniel cannot name. Peace, maybe. He feels it settle on him in a way he has not felt in years. Outside the cabin, the wind nudges the trees, carrying the distant drip of melting rainwater as the storm finally loosens its grip on the land. The sky brightens a little more, sending slivers of gold across the windows. River lifts his head, ears twitching, then lowers his chin gently onto the towel, his eyes half open but alert. Daniel smiles softly. "You did not leave his side once," he says. River's tail taps once against the floor, quiet but sure. Daniel reaches over to scratch behind his ears. The dog leans into the touch, grateful but focused on the pup, as if he understands the responsibility resting beside him. The puppy stirs again, pushing its tiny nose into River's fur. Daniel watches the moment with a quiet awe. Something this small and fragile has chosen to trust, to lean into warmth it does not yet understand. He rises carefully, stretching the stiffness from his legs, and moves to the kitchen area. He warms a small towel, dampens it slightly, and returns to clean the dried mud from the puppy's paws. He works slowly, mindful of every tiny movement. River watches him with unwavering eyes, ready to intervene if the puppy shows even a hint of discomfort. When Daniel finishes, the pup gives a sleepy wiggle, nestling closer to the thick fur along River's chest. Daniel sits back down, elbows resting on his knees. He studies the two of them, feeling something shift inside him. A tenderness he thought had gone quiet long ago. The kind that sneaks in when the world softens just enough to let a little hope through. He whispers, barely above a breath, "You were out there alone." But not anymore. The little creature gives the smallest response, just a soft breath against River's fur. Daniel leans his head back against the couch, letting the warmth of the fire and the trust in the room settle over him. For the first time in a long while, the morning feels like a beginning instead of a burden. The puppy wakes with a tiny gasp, a quiet flutter of breath that draws Daniel's attention instantly. Morning has settled fully into the cabin now, warm light spilling across the floorboards and turning the air a soft gold. River lifts his head as the small creature wiggles against his chest, the movement clumsy but determined. Daniel leans forward, elbows on his knees, watching with a mix of caution and hope. The puppy stretches, its tiny paws pressing gently into River's fur, its eyes still closed but its body seeking warmth with a stronger confidence than the night before. "There you go," Daniel murmurs, his voice soft enough not to disturb the fragile rhythm of the moment. The puppy releases a faint squeak, then burrows deeper into the towel. River shifts his weight slightly, creating a perfect cradle of fur and warmth around the little one. Daniel rises slowly, mindful of every creak of the floor. He moves to the kitchen and warms a small bowl of water, adding just enough powdered milk for a weak pup to manage. When he returns, River looks up at him, ears perked as if listening for instruction. Daniel sits beside them, lifting the pup carefully onto his lap. The little body is warmer now, the breath steadier, though still delicate. Daniel dips a fingertip into the milk mixture and brings it to the puppy's mouth. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a soft nudge. A lick. Another. The tiny tongue trembles with the effort, but the will is there. River watches the scene with an intensity that makes Daniel smile. "You are on duty again, huh?" River's tail taps once against the floor. Daniel continues feeding the little one, patient and steady. Each small swallow is a victory, a quiet defiance against the cold field that tried to silence it. The puppy begins to make a faint humming sound, almost content. Almost grateful. When the tiny creature has taken all it can manage, Daniel wipes its muzzle gently with the warm cloth. It yawns, a tiny sound that disappears quickly into the stillness. He places the puppy back between River's paws. The dog lowers his head protectively, his nose brushing the pup's forehead with a gentleness that seems to reach deeper than instinct. Daniel sits back, letting the warmth of the fire and the quiet companionship ease the weight in his chest. The room feels fuller somehow, as though the smallest heartbeat has added something the space had been missing. His gaze drifts to the window, where sunlight dances across droplets still clinging to the glass. For the first time since he came home from service, the morning does not feel empty. It feels like promise. He watches the puppy nestle into River again, the dog adjusting himself to make the little creature even more comfortable. Daniel whispers into the quiet, "You chose the right guide last night." The puppy lets out a tiny sigh, and River responds with a gentle rumble, a sound as steady as faith itself. Daniel closes his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth settle into the places inside him that had gone cold long before the storm. Something small has found safety here. And in its fight for warmth, it has given some back to him too. The afternoon settles gently over the cabin, its light softer now, dimmed by passing clouds that drift like slow thoughts across the sky. Daniel sits on the rug near the hearth, leaning back against the couch, watching the puppy sleep with a deeper, calmer rhythm. River lies close beside the little one, his body forming a warm crescent around the towel. Every so often, the puppy stretches a tiny paw, brushing River's chest, and the big dog responds with a soft rumble that seems to assure the pup it is safe. Daniel rubs his tired eyes, feeling the weight of the night linger in his bones. He stands and moves quietly around the living room, adjusting blankets, stirring the fire, making the space feel even warmer. The crackling wood sends a faint amber glow across the puppy's fur, giving it a soft sheen that was not there before. He prepares another small mixture of warm milk, testing it carefully with his fingertip to make sure it is not too hot. When he returns to the hearth, River lifts his head slightly, waiting for Daniel's cue. Daniel lifts the puppy into his hands. The warmth is surprising now, a gentle heat spreading from its tiny body into his palms. "You are getting stronger," he whispers. The puppy attempts to open its eyes, lids fluttering with effort before settling closed again. It nudges Daniel's fingertip, finding the milk by instinct, and begins to drink. Each swallow is small, but sure. River's tail moves once, slow and content, as if he understands the significance of every sip. After feeding, Daniel wipes the puppy's muzzle gently, then cups the little body against his chest for a moment, feeling its heartbeat thrum steadily against him. Not frantic. Not fading. Just steady. He returns the pup to River's side, placing it carefully between the dog's front legs. The puppy immediately presses into the warmth, letting out a soft sound that makes Daniel's chest ache with tenderness. He steps back toward the window, gazing outside at the landscape that has begun to dry under the muted afternoon sun. The flooded field still glimmers in patches, but most of the water has begun to recede, leaving behind a sheen that reflects the sky like fractured glass. Daniel watches the scenery quietly, feeling a sense of gratitude that is hard to name. Something small has survived. Something fragile has found warmth. And somehow, in that exchange, something inside him feels a little more whole. He returns to sit near River, placing a hand on the dog's back. River shifts slightly, leaning into the touch without breaking his watchful posture. Daniel murmurs, "You knew where he was. You knew he needed us." River's breath leaves him in a quiet huff, almost a reply. The puppy shifts again, resting its tiny head on River's paw. Daniel's voice softens. "All right, little one. Rest. We have got you." The fire glows warmer. The wind rests its hands against the cabin walls. And in the quiet that follows, Daniel feels the rare stillness of a moment that asks nothing of him but to breathe and be present. Evening settles gently over the cabin, turning the windows into soft mirrors that reflect the warm fire flickering inside. Daniel sits cross-legged near the hearth, his back resting against the couch as he watches the puppy breathe in slow, steady waves. River lies curled protectively around the tiny creature, his fur rising and falling in a calm rhythm that seems to guide the room itself into quiet. The air smells faintly of warm oak and the last trace of rain drifting in from the drying fields. The puppy stirs, stretching one small paw outward before tucking it back under its chin. Daniel leans forward, his voice barely a whisper. "You are stronger today." The words feel like a soft truth rising in his chest. He studies the little creature for another moment, then rises to fetch another warm towel from the small laundry rack by the stove. When he returns, he lifts the puppy gently into his hands. The warmth that greets him is real this time, not borrowed or fading. Holding the pup, he feels the tiny heartbeat thrum confidently against his palms. River lifts his head as Daniel begins to wrap the puppy in the fresh towel, watching each movement with the alertness of a guardian who remembers the cold that almost took this life away. The dog scoots closer, brushing his nose against the towel once Daniel settles the puppy back down. The pup responds with a faint hum of contentment. Daniel smiles softly, a small tug at the corners of his mouth that feels like something long overdue. He looks to the window, where the last light of day clings to the sky like a thin silver thread. The flooded field is still visible in the distance, now quiet, no longer churning with storm water. A landscape washed clean. Returning to the hearth, Daniel lowers himself beside River. The puppy rolls slightly onto its side, pressing into the warmth of River's chest. The big dog curls himself even more tightly around the tiny bundle, as if making a shelter out of his own body. Daniel reaches out and runs his fingers through River's fur, feeling the steady heat beneath. "You saved him," he whispers. River blinks slowly, his eyes deep with an understanding beyond language. Daniel falls quiet, listening to the small sounds of the room, the soft crackle of fire, the gentle breath of the pup, the comforting weight of River's presence beside him. There is a moment when the puppy's breathing pauses, just a brief stillness, and Daniel's heart stirs with worry. He leans in, holding his own breath. Then the pup exhales, long and peaceful, settling deeper into River's. Warmth. Relief sweeps through Daniel, quiet and deep. He lowers his forehead to his clasped hands, letting the feeling pass through him. When he opens his eyes again, he sees the puppy nestled safely, sees River watching over him, sees the fire painting both shapes in a glow that feels almost like blessing. Daniel whispers into the warm, quiet air, "You keep choosing life, little one." The puppy responds with the smallest wiggle. River breathes out a low, gentle sound. And the room, filled with their shared warmth, feels like the safest place in the world. Morning returns with a quiet brightness, slipping through the cabin windows and gliding across the wooden floor until it reaches the small bundle sleeping safely against River's chest. Daniel wakes on the couch, his neck stiff from the night but his heart steadier than it has been in a long while. The fire has burned down to embers, glowing faintly like small promises waiting to be stirred back into flame. He rises slowly and crosses the room, each step soft so he does not disturb the two figures curled by the hearth. The puppy is breathing deeply now, its tiny chest rising and falling with a rhythm that speaks of strength rather than fear. River lifts his head when Daniel approaches, ears twitching in greeting, his amber eyes warm and alert. Daniel kneels, placing a gentle hand on River's neck. "Good morning, partner," he whispers. River's tail taps lightly against the rug, careful not to wake the little one. Daniel adds new logs to the fire, coaxing a fresh flame from the embers. Warmth spreads through the room again, curling around them like an embrace. As the heat grows, the puppy stirs, stretching its tiny legs and making a soft sound that seems halfway between a yawn and a question. Daniel smiles and lifts the pup into his hands. The weight feels different today, just a bit more certain. The puppy's eyes flutter open for the first time, not fully, just a narrow glimpse of soft blue-gray searching the world. Daniel freezes, breath caught in his throat. It is a moment so small and so gentle that it feels almost sacred. "Hey there," he murmurs, his voice breaking into something tender and rough around the edges. The puppy blinks, then presses its nose weakly against his thumb. River rises and steps closer, his breath warm against the back of Daniel's hand as he inspects the pup with the seriousness of someone welcoming a new member of the family. Daniel prepares a fresh mixture of warm milk and settles the puppy on his lap. This time, the little one latches on more eagerly, tiny paws pressing gently against Daniel's fingers. River watches every movement, leaning in with quiet approval. When the feeding is done, the puppy lets out a contented sigh and curls into a small ball, resting comfortably in the curve of Daniel's palm. He holds the tiny creature close to his chest for a moment, letting the heartbeat settle against his own. Outside, sunlight begins to melt the last thin sheets of water across the field, turning the landscape into a patchwork of silver and gold. The world that tried to take this fragile life is now offering it light. Daniel lowers the pup back to the rug, and River immediately forms a warm space around it, his body curving protectively. Daniel sits beside them, letting the moment settle over him like a quiet gift. For the first time in many months, he feels the unmistakable swell of hope rising inside his chest, gentle but real. "You made it through the storm," he whispers to the puppy, though part of the message is meant for himself. The little creature shifts closer to River. The fire crackles softly. And morning, full and bright, wraps around all three of them like a blessing that had been waiting patiently to be found. Afternoon sunlight settles warmly across the cabin, turning the wooden walls into soft amber and filling the room with a gentle stillness that feels earned. Daniel sits on the floor near the hearth, his legs stretched out, his back resting against the couch just as he has the last 2 days. River lies close beside him, his head resting on Daniel's thigh while his body forms a curved shield around the tiny puppy. The little one sleeps soundly, its breaths deeper now, no longer fragile but steady, like a small drumbeat learning its own rhythm. Daniel watches them both with a quiet expression that blends gratitude and disbelief. He runs his hand slowly along River's back, feeling the warm rise and fall under his palm. River responds with a soft sigh, content but vigilant, as if he knows the weight of the life entrusted to his care. The puppy shifts slightly, stretching a tiny paw before rolling onto its belly. Its eyes flutter open for a moment, revealing the same soft blue-gray Daniel saw that morning. The gaze is brief, unfocused, but it pulls something gentle from deep inside him. Daniel leans forward, whispering, "There you are." The puppy turns its tiny head toward the sound of his voice, then reaches for River's fur, burrowing into the warmth. River curls around the small body, giving a low rumble that seems to say, "I am here." Daniel rises slowly and moves to the kitchen, his steps softer than usual. He warms a small pan of water on the stove and prepares another mixture for feeding. The smell of warm milk blends with the wood smoke drifting from the hearth, creating a cozy stillness that feels like it belongs to another world entirely. When he returns, River lifts his head again, watching. The pup wakes fully this time, its tiny body buzzing with a fragile but real energy. Daniel settles on the rug and places the puppy on his lap. It leans heavily into his palm, its warmth undeniable, its heartbeat strong. "You are a fighter," he murmurs. The feeding goes easier than before. The puppy's paws press lightly against his hand, its mouth working with slow, determined effort. River watches every movement, shifting closer, his breath warm against Daniel's arm. When the puppy finishes, it lets out a soft sound, a mix between a sigh and a tiny hum. Daniel wipes its muzzle gently and then lifts it close to his chest. For a moment, he simply holds it there, listening to the steady rhythm, feeling its warmth fill the quiet space between them. Outside the windows, the world is drying. The field, once heavy with floodwater, now glistens under the afternoon sun like a patchwork of silver. The trees stand tall again, their branches no longer burdened by rain. Daniel returns the puppy to River's side. The dog immediately adjusts his position, nudging the pup until it settles in the curve of his body. Daniel sits beside them, letting his shoulder rest against River's. He looks at the two of them, a tiny life saved by a dog who refused to give up and a man who had forgotten what hope felt like until now. "You both brought something back into this house," he whispers. The puppy shifts closer to River. River nudges Daniel's hand. And in that quiet, warm room, something unspoken settles over them, soft, steady, and real. Evening drapes itself gently over the cabin once more, the kind of soft arrival that feels less like a sunset and more like a blessing settling over quiet places. Daniel sits near the hearth again, though this time his posture is not heavy with worry. It is easier now, lighter, as he watches the puppy wobble awake with a small stretch. River is already there, lifting his head the moment the little one stirs, his eyes glowing with that steady, patient devotion that has carried them all through the storm. The fire crackles softly, sending warm light across the rug where Daniel has placed a small folded blanket just for the pup. When he picks the tiny creature up, it no longer melts into his hands with the limpness of exhaustion. It pushes gently, curious and growing stronger. "Look at you," Daniel whispers, unable to stop the smile that finds its way onto his face. The puppy opens its eyes fully now, two soft blue-gray orbs that blink up at him with an innocence that feels like a quiet miracle. It lets out a tiny sound, almost like a greeting. River edges closer, his nose brushing the pup's paw in a gesture that carries more tenderness than words ever could. Daniel prepares another small feeding, warming the mixture carefully. The puppy takes it with eagerness this time, tiny paws flexing against Daniel's hand, its determination clear and bright. River watches, his tail thumping softly against the floor every time the pup swallows. When the feeding is done, the puppy lifts its head, looking between Daniel and River as if recognizing something familiar, something safe. Daniel wipes its muzzle and holds it close to his chest for a moment. The heartbeat he feels is steady, strong, a rhythm no longer overshadowed by cold or fear. A warmth rises in him, slow and deep, loosening knots he did not realize he had been carrying since before the storm. He sets the pup down beside River again, and the dog curls around the small body without hesitation. The puppy nestles under River's chin, letting out a tiny hum of comfort. The fire glows brighter for a moment, reflecting off the two forms settled together in trust. Daniel sits beside them, letting his hand rest lightly on River's back. The big dog turns his head, nudging Daniel's wrist with quiet affection. The room feels full now, full of breath and warmth and something more, the sense that three separate lives have begun to weave into one gentle thread. Daniel looks at them, the guardian who never wavered and the tiny soul who refused to let go, and something shifts inside him, soft but undeniable. In the warm glow of the fire, he breathes out a truth that has been growing slowly, quietly, like dawn finding its way across a dark horizon. Faith does not need proof to be real, he murmurs. The puppy shifts closer to River. River leans gently into Daniel's touch. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel feels the grace of simply being right where he is, held by a moment that asks nothing except to be witnessed. The night settles softly over the cabin, quieter than any night that has come before it. A thin crescent moon hangs above the field, its pale light brushing against the last remnants of puddles left behind by the storm. Inside, the fire glows low and warm, painting slow-moving shadows across the walls as if the room itself is breathing. Daniel sits on the floor near the hearth, his back against the couch, one hand resting on River's broad shoulder. The puppy lies curled between them both, small and warm, its breath steady and sure. There is no tremble now, no frantic flutter of a fading heartbeat. Only peace. Only life. River watches the pup with gentle vigilance, his amber eyes soft, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm that feels like a lullaby. The puppy shifts, rolling onto its back for the first time, tiny paws reaching up toward the air before settling against River's leg. Daniel cannot help but smile at the sight. "You trust us now," he whispers, the words barely audible above the soft crackling of the fire. He leans in, brushing his fingertips gently over the pup's fur, feeling the warmth that was once nearly lost to the cold. River nudges Daniel's arm, a gentle press as if reminding him that this warmth belongs to all three of them now. Daniel closes his eyes for a brief moment, letting the quiet sink into him. He thinks of the flooded field, the bitter wind. The way River had pulled him toward something he did not yet understand. He thinks of the tiny cry buried in the reeds, the fragile weight in his arms, the trembling that echoed the same fragile places inside his own heart. And now, he thinks of this moment, the stillness, the warmth, the truth that sometimes the smallest life can wake something that has been sleeping inside a man for far too long. The puppy lets out a soft sound, almost a tiny sigh, and presses itself deeper into River's fur. River licks the top of its head with a slow, careful motion, a gesture filled with a tenderness Daniel has rarely seen in any living creature. "You saved him," Daniel murmurs to River. The dog meets his eyes, and in that quiet look Daniel feels something settle, an understanding, a recognition, a grace that needs no language. The fire dips lower, embers glowing like stars scattered across the hearth. Daniel reaches out, placing his hand gently over River's and the puppy's tiny paw. 3 lives, warmed by the same flame, held by the same moment. Outside, the moon climbs a little higher, casting a soft silver light through the windows. The world beyond the cabin is still, washed clean by the storm. Daniel breathes deeply, feeling that stillness seep into him, filling places he never thought would feel whole again. He looks at River, then at the tiny pup nestled safely between them, and his voice breaks into a whisper carried only by the warm air of the room. "Sometimes the smallest warmth," he says, "is enough to save us all." The puppy stirs, curling closer. River lowers his head protectively over it. And in the quiet glow of the fading fire, Daniel lets the moment hold him, soft, steady, and full of a grace he no longer needs to question.